What's up, everybody?
Hello, hello.
Hello. Salbonem demnin sotaprik. And you like my Zulu?
Love it.
You gotta keep working on it. And what's up to the U.S. fam on this side? Those who might be tuning in. I got something in my eye.
We are back in the house.
Back in the house for a minute.
Yes.
Yeah. So we just wanted to come out real quick and talk a little bit about something, as we continue to, as I look forward to what I hope to be my upcoming trip back over here.
Yeah.
In the very near future, coming up here soon. I won't reveal the actual dates because I'm still trying to get things worked out.
Right.
But yeah, so as we look forward to that and continue to take in what's out here in these YouTube streets.
Yeah, we're taking
a lot of the
in.
content that's going on out there that we're seeing, which is really great. It's like we don't really watch regular television anymore. We
haven't
do
since
not,
the election.
Just even before then. We really don't watch a lot of regular television, network television, and TV shows and sitcoms. It's like everything is streaming online now. The world has just changed so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, heavy content. YouTube. We pretty much watch. That's consumes most of our TV watching.
Yep, other than
stuff
sports
that we watch
now and again. Yeah.
Yeah, which was actually kind of cool now that you bring it up, the sports thing. Man, would have loved to have been there yesterday for that second matchup of the Soweto Derby between the Kosi Nation, the Chiefs,
wild.
and Orlando.
Yes.
So we got a chance to catch a bunch of the highlights. There's a channel out there that had they uploaded it. Great edits of all the highlights and stuff and the goals and everything. Hopefully that channel, because I think that's the same channel that we caught the some of the Africa.
I was watching it again today. They had other matches going.
Okay, so so we may be able to in the future to get some live streaming of like Premier Football League stuff there. But hey, we were watching and Kosi Nation, man. What's up, man? You down 2-0 for the year in the matchup. I thought with the first highlights that they were going to take it because the energy. I'm telling you, we cannot wait to get back for future Soweto derbies, man. Because just looking at the highlights and the camera angles of those down like near the pitch, sitting near the pitch in the lower rows and stuff. So we got to make sure that I don't think that we're going to be ready for being down like in the mix like that. We're gonna have to go ahead and do that hospitality suite.
Yeah, it was.
But it was just awesome, man. Yeah. And when I compared that match to what I saw of Sundowns versus Cape Town, it was just a different vibe.
Yeah.
The stadium was empty. It was a lot less full. It wasn't F&B.
It was not.
It goes to show you that F&B is a different world when you're talking Chiefs versus Pirates, man. The energy that they played with, they were running that field, up and down. It was pretty amazing. We are so looking forward to taking in future matches. Especially, I'm not sure if next year's Soweto Derby going to be at Moses Madiba. I think it's how you pronounce it, Moses Madiba in Durban or what. But we may have to go over there for that. I'm not sure if the folks there Durban is a 6-hour commute. Do our folks from the Joburg area go over to that match when they have it in Durban? I wonder how much representation is local to Durban. I'm sure the stadium will still be packed for that. Or if
Joburg is traveling there.
Right?
Because that's a stretch.
Although I'm sure you have people, a lot of people that are in the Durban area that are like Chiefs and or Pirates fans as well. So you'll still see that representation out there. But I'm curious. But we're definitely gonna definitely have to look at that. So that was a detour real quick when she brought that up because we were watching that. So I'm very happy that when we're on this side that we'll get a chance to continue to take in those matches and get to just learn more and become more soccer fans and stuff. Because like I said previously, I had only been to one lot, two now, given Soweto Derby. But I just look so forward to taking in more of that. So that was awesome. So hey, like they say, big ups to the Pirates. Up the Pirates. Some people may say up the Pirates. Finish the sentence to use a more Americanized terms.
That was just wow. Yeah.
But it's always good to see that rivalry thriving and stuff over there. So, but in these YouTube streets, man, a lot of content around Burkina Faso,
yes,
and Traoré, over there, and just all of the the engagement around the world across the Black diaspora,
yes,
and different countries that are stepping up and saying, "Hey, we're watching,"
yeah,
and seeing what it is that he's attempting to do over there, to try to, I guess, cut through the propaganda and stuff, and so that's like really exciting to see, how much, like with the online community just across YouTube, and the fact that we all have access and we're so connected these days and in these times. I talk a lot about in these times, right? Because it's like, I'm at a point in my life where, we're in the stages of life that we are, and so you're always thinking about, legacy and what we're leaving behind and all that kind of stuff. And so, when we consider being in the 21st century, living in these times, and amidst all of the turmoil going on around the world in different countries and different dynamics that we're seeing in play, whereas when we were kids, we didn't really understand.
Nope.
But as adults, you have a different perspective of things and a different outlook.
Exactly.
And you process things differently. You say
it's impacting you more too.
Yeah, and then you have to take a step back and say, man, this is like really wild.
It is.
And so, when you see that level of engagement with people, it's very encouraging.
Yes.
In spite of a lot of the fighting that you see going on out here.
Right.
And we do wonder, especially with the family on the continent, whether you're in South Africa or not, I do wonder what are some of your thoughts out there, and feel free to share in the comments. As you like, comment, share, and subscribe our channel. Hopefully, again, we're always approaching things from a different angle. More so, try to be a bit more looking at things from as far as our journey from a philosophical and intellectual perspective, and to have more substantive discussions about things, with some sprinkles here and there of little stuff. But I am curious as to how our brothers and sisters there feel about just the activity that exists in the world around the African continent, and places like South Africa, which we talk a lot about, and a lot of content on South Africa. Do you all feel that it's an opportune time, for you to get the recognition and be noticed the way that you long have deserved to be noticed from a continental perspective and your various countries? So I'm just, is it a unifying thing? Do you see it as a unifying thing? Of course, we sure they see, the spats and the fights, and we know what that stems from, right?
Right.
It's just years and years and generations of us being misinformed and not connected, and not connected to the degree that we are now, right? And so now we have the ability to turn on that phone, unlock that phone, and look and see what, what's being said here as opposed to what's being said there, which leads me to the next point of, in the course of taking in the content that we do, I came, just as with the sports channel that popped up, yesterday, a couple days ago now, there's another podcast that I came across that showed up in my algorithm, and I'll just go ahead and shout them out. It's the BagFuel channel. And I was unfamiliar with them, but apparently they had an interview with rapper AKON, right? Who back during, I guess it was probably early 2000s, he was real big, here in the United States, with T-Pain. It was him and T-Pain, because I used to think that they sounded a lot the like their approach to music was the same with the auto-tune thing. Well, AKON got the well, I'm not gonna repeat the name of the song, but he always say, "You already know I wanna."
Right.
And it sounded like something that T-Pain wrote, or, or whatever, because it's just that vibe. But anyway, so AKON was a really big artist. Still, I guess you can consider him a prominent figure in music and hip hop or whatever. But typically when he speaks, people are kind of listening, because he's a bit of a character in some of the things that he says.
He is.
It's kind of debatable.
Right.
But I guess on the continent, a lot of people kind of, they relate to the fact that he was supposedly doing the AKON city, you know, in Senegal, you know, for many reasons. And that's something that he was discussing on this particular podcast. They were interviewing him. He was talking about a myriad of different things. He was talking about that whole thing. He was talking about his influence on music and when he came into the game, and you know, the things that they did. You know, there was some things he said there that I kind of thought. He was talking about his they suggested whether or not he could be considered responsible for Afrobeat and the success of Afrobeat. You know, and the music that you're just seeing across all of Africa, whether it be from West Africa, whether it be you know, how you know, Amapiano has in South Africa has really gained prominence over the past, you know, year or so, especially, you know, and so he was speaking to that. But he also spoke to something that I keyed on that kind of inspired me for this particular episode for us to cover real quick, because I thought it was very interesting. He was talking about things like innovation across the continent and the future of the continent, and that's kind of the mindset that we're in, you know, with what we're doing as far as reconnecting to the continent. And again, it started it for us years ago, you know, and I've always said, you know, even 10 years ago or more, you know, that, you know, for me and where I saw us at some point, at some point in our lives, you know, having a connection there and doing things there, right? And again, you know, in the forefront of us has always been high on the list was always South Africa, and we had our reasons that we stressed on our earlier episode, one of our first episodes, doing big things in South Africa. That's episode 2 for those of you who might be interested in checking that out. But yeah, so we've always, you know, had plans for that. And so, you know, he was discussing these things, talking about things like innovation and the younger generation on the African continent, and, you know, their empowerment in the different areas. And he, you know, he's pointed to the Traore thing, and just talking about how they're going about doing things when you get the young as opposed to the older established, you know, generations of how things have been done with the leaders. And
we see that here.
Yeah, same issue here. And at one point, he jumped to discussing South Africa, and he spoke in terms of what they spoke to as being white entitlement in South Africa, right? And between him and the guys on the podcast, they got to talking about that a little bit, and he said something in particular, and we'll just cut to a portion of that video so y'all can check out for yourself and see what it was that he said, and then we'll just come back and talk about it. So check this out.
One of my history teachers told me this years ago, that a story about in South Africa, like people were always complaining about why the white people felt they were entitled to the diamonds. And you correct me if you've heard this or not. She said that they made up the story of, well, we came from white monkeys, so we're entitled to that. You ever heard something to that effect?
I didn't hear that, really. But I do know in South Africa, white people don't have it as good as white people have it in America. Wow. South Africa is probably the one place in Africa that was able to switch the table, where the white folks live in the hood and the black people are living good.
Really?
Yes.
I've been to Joburg and Soweto.
This is why Elon Musk is fighting for those white folks in South Africa now. Because he feel like they're being mistreated and there's no equality.
For white people in South Africa.
Exactly.
In Africa! The white people in South Africa, where apartheid was there, all this wild shit. There's no equality.
It sounds crazy, right?
You gotta simplify.
It sounds crazy, right?
They're fighting for equality in Africa.
Yes, white folks are fighting for equality in Africa. But guess what? Wow. Because blacks were the majority.
Well, that makes sense.
And guess what? In South Africa, they've united. So they can't run that on them niggas. Now, if all the other countries do that,
they're in trouble.
We good.
And so that's what he said, right? So y'all saw what he said, and you know, that just kind of tugged at me, like immediately. Obviously, being on the ground in South Africa and having a place there, and us being outsiders as well, you know. And he is, and the first thing I had to question was whether or not I said to myself,
was he even on the ground there?
When the last time AKON been to South Africa, or has he ever been to South Africa?
Right.
In order to make a statement like that. So I got a question, and AKON, he's not watching us, right?
I wouldn't care if he was.
Well, but I would ask AKON, have you ever been to South Africa?
Right.
And if
it's
so,
a logical question.
when's the last time you were there? Right.
Yeah.
To say what he said, and specifically when he said, "Oh, they didn't switch the table in South Africa," right? And then he said, "White people live in the hood, black folks are doing good," right?
What area?
And the thing is, and that's not to say that black folks, because here's the way I process that. We grew up in poverty here in the United States. We came from nothing, and again, we have, we detailed our life story to the folks, especially in South, and of course, all things are relative, right? But we came up very rough, as many of us do, especially back in the day. Things are a bit different nowadays, right? The generations have, we've seen improvement here, but when we came up,
it was
rough.
Very rough.
Very, very poverty stricken. So we know what it's like, okay?
Exactly. For real.
But for him to say that, so I bring that point up to say that all things are relative, even though we came up very rough and we came up very impoverished. There were times in my life when I was a kid where I said, you know what, life is good.
Yeah.
Because
I think we just didn't even know any better. For me, I didn't know any better.
You only know what you know.
Exactly.
And that's a good point. So if your experience every day is what you live amongst and in, you adjust to that.
Exactly. That's what you see all around you. That's what we saw.
And that becomes your norm, your standard. And so you learn how to survive in that environment. So when I place it in those terms, okay, that's not to say that black people are not happy and that black people are not making progress and that black people are not, enjoying, the better things in life, right? But what are better things?
Right.
Is it the fact that you have a BMW or a Porsche that you drive down the street every day? Is it the fact that you got an expensive piece of jewelry around your neck, or you're wearing the flyest fashions all the time, or is that what it is? No, it's not necessarily, right? Living good could just be something as simple as I have a good relationship with my family. We spend time with each other. I'm getting a reasonable level of education. I'm fairly healthy. I'm safe for the most part. And again, the whole safety thing is just because I grew up dodging bullets every day, pretty much. There was some level of gunfire in my immediate vicinity or that I was running away from at least multiple times a week growing up during the summer months.
Yes.
It's not like I'm unfamiliar to violence or watching people getting shot or shot at, or beat up badly.
Oh, yeah.
So these are not things that we're strangers to. But I just wanted to put that out there to acknowledge that this is not saying that black people are not okay. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
From just a basic humanity perspective. But of course we know that that's not true. Especially in the Johannesburg area, I can't speak for, and I'm sure Cape Town with the demographics there, it's even more so. It's even less likely that white people are living in the hood and black folks are living good, because we understand the dynamics of South Africa and the disparities there, and so I'm sure that the family will have enough to say around that. Those that want to contribute in the comment section, but I think about when we move around Johannesburg area and areas that we driven through. I'm thinking that AKON has obviously never been, through Alexandra.
Could not have been.
Right, and so, because I haven't seen rolling through Alexandra. I didn't see no white folks on the street.
I did not either.
I never, in areas of Soweto that we were in.
Exactly.
I'm sure they're there, right? But not
when
you talk about being in a hood,
right?
In what we like to call the hood, and I don't really. I'm not sure that I necessarily like that either when we apply it to Africa, because when we created that term over here, the hood, right? We know what that means. It's typically urban areas that have like projects and stuff like that, whether they be high-rise projects or low-rise projects, and you got all of the typical stories of the different levels of criminal activity, and it's rough and dangerous and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I don't necessarily know that I like the fact that we Americanize everything when we start to speak to over there. It's like the hood, because what I see as a hood over there is not the same as what we call the hood here.
Yes, different.
Because I mean, when you look at communities like Alexandria, it's more wide swath areas, and we know that those areas were set up from a governmental perspective to be a certain way geographically, and those sorts of things. So I just don't see those as being the same things.
No.
But anyway, he wanted to make a point, and that's the way he put it. So I guess we'll address it from that point. But I know what I see, the area over where we live down in Johannesburg South, demographically speaking, we have higher levels of white concentration down in that area, about I think 60-some%,
right.
Which I'll just kind of, let me just show them what it looks like in our area, where a lot of white folks live. It's hardly the hood, so check this out. So you think that's the hood?
I think that's the hood.
That's the hood. In fact, no, that is not the hood.
Far from the hood.
So in fact, every time we go through Glen Vista, heading over into the Glen area, whatever. It's breathtakingly beautiful in how much it reminds me of, and I've never been to those sections of California, where they have multi-million-dollar U.S. dollar mansions, 10, 20, 30 million dollar, mansions and residences in the Hollywood Hills and stuff like that. But I always think about, California when I'm going through Glen Vista and that area, and I'm like, man, this is just crazy, that you got these levels of homes over here and built out in these areas, and in the U.S. Beautiful. These homes will cost you, again, $5-7 million, $10 million, $15 million,
easily,
right? In U.S. But that's hardly the hood, and so I found that in the Glen Vista area, demographically speaking, the population distribution is about, and of course down in our area in Johannesburg South, there's a lot more diverse. We have a nice mix of, white, black, colored, which is, Indian distribution is a little bit more.
It is.
But even still down in that area, that population is about 60-something% white.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you consider Johannesburg, and as they said, that, you see a black prominence all around Johannesburg, yes, but what I don't see is white folks living in the hood.
I have not seen that.
When I go through Alexandria, when we're down in places like Hillbrow and Central Business District, I see black folks.
Yes.
Now if you want to say hood in the American sense, if you're talking down like in Hillbrow or something like that, that would be more classified as something like that, but. From a dynamics perspective, from the hood dynamic, right?
Right.
Again, it's just, this is just intellectual conversation is what it is for the sake of discussion. But yeah, down our way, I see that, walking down the street, we see the middle age, our black women, mothers, who are walking down the street with sacks or bags on their back, or transporting stuff, because they're working in the homes up in there, maintaining those homes, cleaning, taking care of different things, or in areas of Santon, we were out there, you see that very heavily behind those big huge walls, or you see brothers walking down the street pulling a big huge trailer behind them with all kinds of stuff on it, a big lawn debris on their back. That's huge. Just, and they're going uphill at that. And it's like,
it's huge.
It's like, man, this is what
areas.
We're doing up in there.
Right.
We're not there living for the most part. Our people in there working.
So I just don't know what AKON.
It's a misrepresentation, and I think, you know, and the other thing that he went on to say was that whites are fighting for equality in South Africa, and again, and that goes back to a point that we're going to get to in a few minutes. Is that the misinformation out there, and that's the one drawback with this internet, with us being connected. And he's latching on to that story, and that, you know, that propaganda, if you will, of what Elon Musk is doing over here in the United States, because he's tried to use his position and his connection to South Africa and being a South African to turn the government against over there. And so he presents this story of, you know, white people are being oppressed and they're fighting for equality over there. I'm like, where? I haven't seen around Joburg. Again, the white people that we have encountered for the most part have been cordial.
Oh yeah.
You know, we haven't encountered a whole lot of them, but those that we have dealt with, we haven't had any issues with them. We had one rude old man one time. We parked next to him in Mall of the South parking lot. He kind of because we parked close to him, and it had nothing to do with other than just being the proximity of where we wanted to park.
Exactly. That was the only.
And he kind of said something. I was like, nah, you got the wrong one, dude. It's 2024 or 2023 or whatever. 2023 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Like,
no, not today.
But other than that, haven't really had any encounters.
Have not.
But I don't see where this fighting for equality thing coming. I haven't seen, you know, white folks relegated to you can't move in this direction or be in this certain area after a certain time or show me your ID or being pulled over by a cop and being harassed or face to the ground with a knee in their back.
Right.
I have not had any experience with white people in South Africa where they are dealing with oppression, right? I mean, now I understand they have the debates about the land ownership and holdings and those sorts of things and how they feel, relatively speaking, you know, when you have to consider how the land was taken in the first place.
Exactly.
Right? And so it's a distortion in my opinion.
It is.
And I think for him to say that, given his platform and given who he is a very dangerous and disingenuous thing.
Very.
So, but I think, you know, when we were on the ground there early on in our journey, and you might remember a couple situations and in pick and pay, because us as being Americans, if you will, from the U.S. and being, even though we're black, we have lived in and we have grown in U.S. society. That's we're Americans.
Right.
We're U.S.ers, and so. Again, all things being relative, when you consider the average, let's say middle class, but definitely upper middle class Black American, when you place in the environment in South Africa compared to their white South Africans, right? We kind of sit at a different level from an economic perspective, right? And I hate to use the term above, right? But that's the only way you can compare it, right? But we're typically going to sit above your average upper middle class or even upper class white South African.
Yeah.
So for us, when we're on the ground there, it's a different lens that we look through, right? And so for me, when I hear AKON say that, I'm like, you know, I get it, you know, but white folks are not doing bad in South Africa by and large.
Not bad at all.
Right. And so I think back, it even caught me by surprise. You may remember when we first bought our place over there and started spending time there, we were in Pick and Pay. And there we were in line. We were in line. We had done some grocery shopping. And there was probably, I would say, a middle-aged white woman in front of me. She had a bunch of food on the counter. It was taking forever to get through the line. It probably took. She was the person in front of me, and she had her groceries on the belt. Okay. And she was paying with a car. I believe it's called maybe a SASA, South African Social Security
some type of card
agency. Card. I think I learned that's probably their gold card. What's called the SASA gold card. Or something to that effect. And so I think the situation was that they were ringing up her items, and she was trying to figure out how to get everything to fit in with her budget.
The budget, okay.
Remember that?
Yeah,
because at one point I was like, I was looking at you.
Yes.
And I'm perfectly okay. And again, understand, things are going to move a little bit slower maybe because the systems are different, over there and stuff, maybe not as efficient. But it got to a point where we were waiting there behind her 15, 20 minutes almost.
Right.
We were in that line
know what
forever.
was going on, yeah.
And I was like, and I kept looking at you and I was like, what's the deal? And I was tempted. I remember asking you, I was like, you think I should just pay for all of her stuff?
Oh, yes.
Because I was literally going to, she had a lot of groceries.
That. She did. I remember that.
But I was like, especially once I had seen the prices of everything over there, I was like, but at the same time, I felt strange because this was an individual. She was white, and that was and I had my perceptions about South Africa and the history and stuff like that. So I was really surprised to see that a white person would transact groceries with something like that, because I had it, and that maybe that's a prejudice or a bias. It could be considered that, right? I had my perceptions about so I say that to say that yes, not everybody's rich over there, right? But we know when we look around, the majority of white people that we see, the lawyers that we deal with, when we're in restaurants, or whatever, you got the black people are serving those tables, but the person walking around with the clipboard is a white person.
They're the managers,
the general managers, or whatever. So that's the capacity that we see them working in. So, but I just thought that was really strange. And then the other time was when we were at coming out of the Mall of the South. We were getting ready to try to pay for our parking, and I had my first problem with the machine. For some reason, parking machines, payment machines in Johannesburg do not like us. Especially at Mall of the South.
Yes. It never fails.
And I couldn't get it to take my money. It kept spitting out my 10 rand that I was using to pay. And there was an Afrikaner behind me, and I could tell from his accent. But he was like,
oh, yes.
He was like, I'll take your 10 rand.
And he was serious.
He was really excited about it, too.
He was
I started
serious.
to give it to him, but I needed to go to another machine and pay ultimately.
Me.
I was surprised by that. I was like,
me.
It's only 10 rand. He's making too big of a deal about, because he had a big, huge smile on his face. He's like, yeah, give it to me, right?
Yes, he did.
That really surprised me as well, because I was thinking, it's 10 rand. To me, it wasn't a big deal. But those were two situations where I saw, a white person. And again, being uneducated and not in that experience, are really knowledgeable at that time, especially, all things are relative, right? They're not all rich. They're regular people, but they're not struggling like that.
Right.
Not to the degree that, like I said, that AKON paints it in that statement. And so I just found the whole thing problematic, but yeah, so I think in closing, to wrap this up, I just think we have a responsibility when we have these platforms out here, even us, that's why, we're quick to, hey, educate us, tell us what the deal is,
Because if you're not living there on the grounds, then, you really don't know, for sure. At this point, a lot of times people just be making assumptions about stuff.
Right. Yeah, when you're not there at all. And even, with us being there to the level that we're there, even after you're living there, it's going to take you years and years to really come to understand many of the cultural dynamics and the political dynamics.
Absolutely.
And tune in, and you have to be tuned into it. So I just think that we have a responsibility, as we're sharing information out here, to be as comprehensive and as open as possible when it comes to serious things and the things that we say.
Right.
And so that I just wanted to talk about it because it just made me think about how it is does it help us in the time that we're in reach our goal, because in spite of all of the bumps in the road that we encounter, ultimately we all have to get to this destination because of the critical time that we're in this 21st century, right? We won't survive the 21st century, obviously, but those who come behind us and those who come behind them will. And so, as we work, I think, to do our individual parts to move us to the place that we deserve to be as a diaspora, and specifically on the continent, because I know I'm sick and tired of being told that it's the dark continent, all this kind of stuff, dark being symbolic, of being, incapable of,
right,
uncivilized, as they said. I'm sick of that characterization, and so we have a lot of work to do together.
Statements like that,
it doesn't help. Doesn't help. So we just wanted to talk about it and get your opinions on it. So we again invite any commentary that you have, no matter how big or small, and something to think about and something to talk about. Like when we're amongst ourselves, like when we're on the ground, we hope to have more substantive exchange with people, be positioned to be able to do so. But yeah, I wonder what the conversations that our brothers and sisters there have amongst themselves about these things. But hopefully we'll have the opportunity to get more of that.
Yes.
So, but that's pretty much it, and we'll go ahead and wrap that. And again, looking forward to coming over, and and then we'll be over later on in the year when I'm over for another event that I'm looking very forward to. We'll talk more about that coming up soon. That's going to be something more along the lines of business and some of the things looking to get done there. So hey, Ed, at the end of the day, it's just
Mel
and me, and this has been
the podcast.
Y'all take it easy till next time.
Hello.
Peace.